The Global Briefing on SAfm.
Well, let's get into the global briefing 22 after 6 o'clock. The U.S. Navy Secretary has walked out mid-crisis. Russia looks set to be invited back into the G20 at the highest level. And with the Strait of Hormuz closed, more than a fifth of global trade is now squeezing through a single East Asian choke point. Joining us for more on this story is Dr. Joan Swart, a researcher in military science at the University of Stellenbosch Military Academy. Dr. Swart, good morning to you. Thank you for your time. Firstly, the U.S. is in the middle of a crisis. American forces are actively being deployed. What does John Phelan's departure signal about what is happening within the security apparatus of the U.S. right now?
Yeah, good morning, Kathy, and thank you for having me. As we look at all these resignations, and by the way, I read yesterday, I haven't confirmed it yet, but that he was actually dismissed by Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, calling himself the Secretary of War of the U.S. So it's less about this one resignation, and it's more about, as you've been referring to, about a defense system that's become under pressure during an active confrontation. So, as you said, John Phelan, the U.S. Navy Secretary, has left his post, or he's been dismissed. And the reports are saying that Hegseth fired him because of him telling troops not to obey illegal orders. And he will be replaced by Hung Chau. The reasons given or cited were poor progress on shipbuilding, but there's more of a conflict with the Pentagon leadership and a possible ethics violation. And as I said, he's not the first. Joe Kent was the other high person one. He resigned as National Director of Counterterrorism a week or two ago, stating that he couldn't work with the decisions, he couldn't agree with the decisions that the U.S. government and military is making regarding this conflict. And then there's been people high up in the military like Randy George, Rodney Hood, and William Green as well. So if we look at how to interpret it, it's important to centralize control in a war like this. So if you have resignations or dismissals like that, it shows to a pattern of leadership consolidation under Trump. So they are not happy with, and they're not tolerating any disagreements in their rank. They prefer loyalty and alignment, therefore, over institutional continuity. And what's important of Phelan, especially, is that he's, as you said, from the Navy, and the naval power is the center of the operations right now. It's very critical in the Strait of Hormuz tensions and in deterrence versus Iran. They have not been very successful simply because Iran has got extremely good precision standoff missiles, which means that they can keep Navy ships. And we've seen with the carrier groups that they have to stay about 500 miles or something away from the Strait of Hormuz and from Iran's territory.
Joan, when it comes to Russia and the G20, are we likely to see President Putin walking Miami?
I don't know. Russia says that it received an invitation to join the 2026 G20 Summit in Miami. I haven't seen any confirmation from the US, and it's also not clear who would then attend, Putin or anybody, a lower level delegation. But the context is that Russia has been isolated since the Ukraine war, as we know. And the G20 has been used as sort of a contested platform over Russia's participation and other pressure points that the West wants to put onto countries, including South Africa. As you know, we haven't been, or we've been disinvited or not been invited as well. So, in terms of the narratives by Russia, they of course looking to renew or regain their diplomatic legitimacy,
Mm.
and they want to show that they're not isolated and that they're still a global power, which of course they are, with all the multipolar realignments going on with BRICS and so on, and Russia actually, due to all of this, moving closer to China, and that includes the Iran war and the Russia-Ukraine war and all of the sanctions put on Russia. So they've been moving closer and closer to China to form a stronger sort of leading the global south, if you will.
Look, I wonder, Dr. Joan, I mean, if Russia can make it to the G20, surely South Africa should, surely, or maybe we can go as Russia's plus one. And then just to wrap it up, just to wrap it up,
Yes.
the Strait of Hormuz is putting a lot of pressure on the Strait of Malacca. Speak to us a bit about
Yes.
that. Very little known about the Strait of Malacca, at least not in the context of this global conflict currently.
Yeah. So the Strait of Malacca, just for your listeners, it connects the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. It's a very narrow strait, so it's straddled by Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. Um, so it's the strait is entirely in their territorial waters, which doesn't mean that they can control it in terms of law, but there's no real way to enforce that law, as we are seeing now in the Strait of Hormuz. So it's setting a precedent for other players to close other straits as well. And this strait carries around 25 to 30% of the global trade. And it's very critical for China, again, for Japan and South Korea. So China is watching this very, very closely. Um, and they are worried. They see Hormuz as a warning signal, and they are asking themselves and the other Asian states as well, what will happen if a similar disruption happens in the strait? Um, the US and Indonesia has signed a partnership, a defense deal now recently, which increases the risk and the sort of the signals that something may happen, because as we know, the US sees China actually as their main rival. So they set themselves a little bit back in this war with Iran. I think they thought that it would go quickly, perhaps 72 hours, but most certainly not longer than 2 to 3 weeks. And they've misjudged completely. Um, and they've expended a lot of their munitions as well, missiles, for instance.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Dr. Joan Swart, let me thank you for your time, researcher in military science at the University of Stellenbosch.